मैं तो बचपन में सोचता था यारी दिखा रहे हैं।
हाँ कम है हल्का चाल चलत अनुपम चाल चलत मतंग गत मानो पद पर बाजे के जो जल में प्रतिबिंब देखत तैसी तान सैन प्रभु रस बस कीनो आन खाना पीऊ ये जिसको आजकल ये लोग ख्याल बना बना के गा रहे हैं, ये तानसेन का ध्रुपद है। बाजे नीके घूंघट ठुमकत चाल चलत नवेली, अनुपम चाल चलत मतंग गत हाथी जैसे, मानो पग परे पवेली, पवेली मतलब वो छिड़क रहा है, वो बो रहा है। अनुपम चाल चलत मतंग गत मानो पग परत पवेली, जैसे हाथी की सूंड यों 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 होती है, जिस तरह एक किसान जो है अनाज को यों 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 डाल रहा है, इस ढंग से वो चल रही है। ज्यों जल में प्रतिबिंब देखे तैसी जेहर बेली, जेहर मतलब वो एक के ऊपर एक वो घुंडी रखते हैं, शादी के दौरान वो सब रखते हैं, तो अपना जब वो प्रतिबिंब देखती पानी में अक्स देखती है तो पानी हिलता तो ऐसा जैसे वो एक के ऊपर एक वो रखे हैं। और तानसेन प्रभु तानसेन क्या रस बस कीनो खान खाना, अब खान खाना शायद मानसिंह थे या कोई थे, उनको खान खाना किताब तो उन पर उन्होंने कस दिया, तो उनको उनने बस में कर दिया उस लड़की ने। रस बस कीनो खान खाना पीयू पाया की, उनको अकेला पाया और उनको बस में कर लिया। अब इससे कौन सी इबादत हो रही है हमें समझाइए, कौन से भगवान पूजे जा रहे हैं? एक लड़की चल रही है, उसकी चाल का बताया जा रहा है, ऐसी ऐसी चल रही है, और चलते चलते खान खाना थे अकबर के दरबार के, तो उसने रिझा लिया। उसमें कौन सा वर्शिप हो रहा भाई हमें बताओ, कौन से शिव जी पूजे जा रहे हैं, कौन सी सरस्वती पूजी जा रही है फिजूल में? द्रौपदी इज ऑल अबाउट वर्शिप। जी हाँ, नहीं खान खाना उस जमाने में खिताब दिया जाता, तो अब्दुल रहीम खान है खाना, मानसिंह खान है खाना, खान खाना लोगों को खिताब दिए, सिर्फ रहीम पर कस दिया, किसी पे कोई किसी खान खाना पर कस दिया, ऐसे चलता है। They never sang a Drupad, to be honest. They made a song and dance about singing one. They never sang it in that.
But they were famous for that.
उनने भी वही चाल चली ना, वो बंद कर दी कि जब वो सब चले गए, मुसलमान चले गए पाकिस्तान, अंग्रेज चले गए इंग्लिस्तान, उल्टा कर रहे हैं हम। छूटो जाए बाबुल बाबुल कहार मोरी डोलिया सजावे रे, चार कहार मोरी डोलिया सजावे रे, मोरा अपना बेगाना छूटो जाए, नैहर छूटो जाए, मोरा अपना बेगाना, अपना बेगाना छूटो जाए, बाबुल मोरा रे, नैहर छूटो जाए, अंगना तो पर्वत भया, और दहली भई विदेश, अंगना तो पर्वत भया, और दहली भई विदेश, ले बाबुल घर आपनो, मैं चली पिया के देश, बाबुल मोरा मोरा नैहर छूटो जाए।
माशाअल्लाह, क्या
बहुत
बात
बड़ी
है।
बहुत बड़ी। घर ये तेरा सदा न मेरा है, रात दो रात का बसेरा है, आरज़ू बोझ बढ़ता जाएगा, चल खड़ा हो अभी सवेरा है, चार कार मोरी डोलिया सजावे, मोरा अपना बेगाना छूटो जाए, बाबुल मोरा नैहर छूटो जाए, नैहर छूटो जाए।
Thank you.
And service to humanity must be limitless, unconditional, and universal. The 12th century Sufi saint Muinuddin Chishti advised his disciples, and I am quoting, to develop rain-like generosity, sun-like affection, and earth-like hospitality. When the sun rises, it gives light and warmth to all, irrespective of caste, creed, faith, or religion. When the clouds burst open, they pour water over the palace and over the hut alike. The earth extends its generosity to all, the sinner as well as the saint. These are the expressions of divine benevolence and providence, rahmat and rububiyat, and they are reflected in the entire system of cosmos. This was the revolutionary concept of devotion to God through service to all humanity without any discrimination that the Sufi saints of medieval India presented before the world. Crowds came without any distinction, and they went back with the blessing and the benediction of these saints. This is something that Muslim Research Foundation were born to do, to extend the message of universal love and service to humanity, something that we are forgetting in the contemporary age. This devotion, this yearning to experience God in one's own being, inspired many of the Sufis like Fariduddin and Amir Khusro to compose beautiful and immortal poetry and music, which is still currently recited in many parts of South Asia. It is through this medium of poetry and music that the Sufi saints would reach and touch the hearts of millions of people in South Asia in their own language and get the message of love and harmony and service across to them. I like you to know that there is no better exponent of this great tradition than our guest speaker tonight, Dr. Regula Qureshi. We are indeed fortunate and honored to have Dr. Qureshi talk to us about this message and about this medium of music. Although Dr. Regula Qureshi knows no introduction either to the university community or to the Muslim community or to the South Asian community, but all of us may not know the many splendid career and achievement of Dr. Regula Qureshi. So allow me a few more minutes to say something about her. Dr. Qureshi was born in Switzerland in a family with ancestors such as the famous Ulrich Zwingli, the most important reformer in the Swiss Protestant Reformation in the 16th century, and also the 19th century historian Jacob Burckhardt. She was trained in European musical tradition. She embraced the culture of Indian subcontinent and particularly its rich musical heritage as a result of her marriage to an Indian social scientist. After studying cello, which she studied at the Curtis Institute of Philadelphia, Dr. Regula Qureshi studied sarangi with Hamid Hussain in Pakistan. She has been a cellist with the Saskatoon Symphony Orchestra from 1962 to 63 and with the Edmonton Symphony Orchestra from 1963 to 1973. She has performed a number of solo concerts and chamber recitals, as well as gave lecture recitals in Edmonton, Montreal, New York, Chicago, Cambridge, Madison, Philadelphia, Cincinnati, and you don't want me to go on giving you all the names. As a professor of ethnomusicology, Dr. Regula Qureshi specializes in Indo-Muslim Sufi music and researches musical anthropology, particularly in the South Asian culture. Her book, Sufi Music of India and Pakistan, Sound, Context and Meaning in Qawwali, was published in 1986. She has also co-authored many books and articles. Two of her books which she has co-authored are The Muslim Community in North America, The Muslim Families in North America. In addition, she has been a member of a number of organizations. Now, the list of her awards, her grants, her fellowships, her in community involvement, professional involvement is too long even to think about, let alone talk about. So I'll stop here and with great pleasure invite Dr. Qureshi to come and speak with us.
I'm actually looking for my manuscript.
Oh, it might be on his side. Is that
For making this possible. I have been a real admirer of the group of people who have dedicated themselves to this purpose And it very much accords with the kind of views that I have. And it allows me, an outsider, to become part of this effort, to try to share the excitement, the depth, the beauty, and the enjoyment that I have had from being involved in Muslim culture through music and through poetry and through spiritual and intellectual engagements. What we will do today, what I would like to do, is something I have done in other places, and it's something that is very important to me, to talk about the sound of music in the culture of Islam. And I would like to start by saying that musical sound exists in the life of Islam as created by Muslims. But at the same time, we know that music is a theologically controversial concept in Islam. Nonetheless, musical sound plays a highly significant role in articulating the singularly verbal message of Islam, both in its universal Quranic form, but also in the form of local traditions of the expression of Muslims through poetry and hymns. To explore this reality, I have set myself the challenge to draw from my own study as well as my life among South Asian Muslims in India, in Pakistan, and in Canada. South Asian Muslims are a transnational community today, solidly situated conceptually in a history of transnationality, which is anchored in the universalist foundation of Islam and the political history of trans-ethnic and transnational Muslim polities that have formed, in fact, the first world system in the 13th century. The first world system is not the one we're in now. It's the Muslim one of the 13th century. But that'll be another lecture, not given by me. Musical life, however, is always local and particular. In sharing what is eminently shareable, Muslims have taught me that to learn about music in the life of their Islam means learning how music works in the lives of believers. My agenda then is first to offer a vignette of traditional sonic religious practices among South Asian Muslims as I have experienced, recorded, and researched them. Starting 25 years ago. The second goal is to examine this musical life also among us migrants here in North America as an ongoing process involving the organization of the current situation in the terms of a past, and to relate it to issues of Muslim transnationality and identity in the North American diaspora. Our starting point must be the basic laws or conceptions that underlie the connections between religion and music in Islam. To review briefly, Muslims, like Jews and Christians, consider themselves people of the book, and their religion based on the ontology of the divine word. Though preserved in written form, the word of God lives as a verbal message emanating from God for human beings, hence its abiding intrinsic orality. That is the sound of words, not just pieces, not just lines on a paper. The appropriately sounded word, and I'm spelling word with a capital W here, meaning the word of God, is therefore central to Islamic ritual observance. An exclusive and exquisite melodic rhythmic system has been developed to sound the divine word and to articulate its distinct uniqueness, different from any other words or other music. This distinct musical way of religious recitation stands in conceptual opposition to all non-religious musical sounds, vocal and especially instrumental. Indeed, a theological debate continues over what is religiously acceptable musical sound, fueled particularly by the spiritual use of musical sounds by Sufis. That's in no way a universally accepted practice. A copious literature on the subject testifies to the relevance of this issue. The Greek-derived word music, musika, is therefore religiously inappropriate for religiously used musical sound, as is the secular term song and singing. The term in use since the Prophet himself is reading, Arabic qira'ah or Urdu barna, and other words in other Muslim languages. This word also means reciting or chanting. Significantly, Muslim linguistic use does not distinguish an oral version of reading from a visual one. To read means at the same time to articulate sound and to apprehend meaning. Our title then should properly read chant or recitation, in South Asian Muslim life. There is clearly a conceptual contradiction between Muslim concepts and the discourse of ethnomusicologists or Western scholars who are interested in the properties, uses, and effects of musical sound wherever it is present. So we always call it music, even if it's actually culturally inappropriate. Equally clearly, at the level of experience and perception, Muslims respond and culturally manage musical sound by using the religious rule system in highly complex and creative ways, ways that transcend the simple yardsticks of the normative and reveal deep sensitivity and interest toward the significant effects of musical sound, especially in relation to the primary verbal communication of the word. The very persistence of intense disputation about music testifies to this, as does the central place accorded to the musical arts by the patrons and creators of Muslim high culture from Spain to Indonesia. Whether called music or recitation, what are the significant effects of musical sound? Unlike verbal sound, musical sonority both prefigures signification and it envelops it. With its powerful evocative capacity, its immediacy and its reach, the very sound of a music inexorably calls forth sensation and emotion, a response that is both physiological and affective. The physical and oral sensation of music not only activates feeling, it also activates links with others who feel. In an instant, the sound of a music creates bonds that are as deep and intimate as they are broad and universal. Since the ephemeral bond of sound does not commit spatial closeness, experiencing music together leaves the personal, individual, and interior domain unviolated. Yet at the same time, the experience becomes public, shared, and exterior. Such a reification of one's feeling and sensation, in turn, endows musical sound with a social existence that we code as identity, our music, our sound. No wonder music is generally owned by people as that which is most distinctly their own and speaks of their identity. And musical sound is also thereby endowed with shared associations and connotations that we code as aesthetics, art. Underrated in musical scholarship, the social nature of musical experience is thus deeply intertwined with its personal individual character in a highly significant way. If Islamic music, and we'll put it in quotation marks because we know it's not appropriate, but we're using this word as a scholarship word. So if Islamic music is a socially as well as aesthetically grounded process, it needs to be explored as a practice, as a behavior among those who create and receive it, as a meaning articulated and shared, as religious life, not just religious rule. To adopt such a perspective is also to address a crucial contemporary question arising from a widely proclaimed self-definition that has penetrated public consciousness, identifying Islam as a highly universalist global movement of assertion and conformity. This identity is projected by religious political constituencies that identify closely with fundamental tenets of Orthodox Islam, an Islam deliberately purged of place and time-specific manifestations. Today and here, any discourse on Muslims inevitably comes up against this question that is raised both within and outside the Muslim milieu. What does this fundamentalist movement represent in the life of Islam? To what extent does it represent Muslims in actual communities? What is the status of universalist vis-à-vis local practices? And conversely, how are local differences sustained or not in the face of an assertively global Islamic paradigm? How do Muslims live this dialectic? Music is a deeply involving, inclusive, and non-coercive process in religious practice. Can the musical domain, so central as a focus of fusing emotion with cognition and of fusing with shared experience, individual with shared experience, teach us about the way difference coexists with universality in the practice of Islam? And in a more activist vein, can these qualities of music be mobilized to offer access to understanding from outside while also maintaining the integrity of those within? This capsule ethnography attempt, which I'm making now, to offer a lived instance within the complex web of cultural and ideational strands, is an attempt of moving in the direction of that kind of mutual understanding. So the concrete music I'm talking about was actually studied and experienced by me 20 to 25 years ago in India and Pakistan, where I did a lot of documenting of religious musical traditions. A rich and diverse soundscape of religious texts and reciting traditions form part of the South Asian Muslim religious experience. Supreme and universal is the recitation of the Quran and of related liturgical texts in Arabic. We cannot talk about anything, any musical expression among Muslims if we don't start with this. So I haven't forgotten about Sufism. So the recitation of the Quran and related liturgical texts in Arabic, foremost the call to prayer and prayer itself, as well as salutations to the Prophet of God. Quranic recitation takes many forms and is part of every Muslim's life in different ways. What is essential is that uttering God's word in the Quran and by extension other religious texts is an oral activity with its full implication of internal and external participation. Words are not a transparent conduit of meaning. Their sound is deeply implicated in the experience of their meaning. Hence, the sounds of the words are also set apart in recitation by making them sonically appealing. Khush ilhan, literally well-sounding. Recitation means making the words one's own and making them live by actually saying them, whether aloud or silently to oneself. Now, based on the Quranic word, thank you, and reinforced by the Persian Sufi tradition since the 13th century, we've already heard about that, the ideology of the sounded word also extends to vernacular religious hymns. Their principal language in South Asia is Urdu, and they are musically South Asian. These hymns can be recited by anyone, anywhere, but their primary context of performance are devotional assemblies centering on principal religious figures of Islam. A lead reciter, usually with a supporting group, presents a series of hymns to an audience of devotees who respond in specific ways to the religious listening experience. The performance style of each assembly is directly linked to the function of enhancing the religious poem that is being sung and of expressing the spiritual emotional experience which it evokes in the listener. Today, we will talk about two main types of recitational events. Each of these is built on a repertoire of appropriate hymns with a distinct musical style that gives articulation to the identity of the ritual. At the same time, a universalizing aspect in all these assemblies is their permeation with scriptural phrases from the Quran and passages in Arabic, especially at the beginning and at the end. The most universally practiced of these assemblies is called Milad, and it is the assembly celebrating the birth of Prophet Muhammad. I'm starting with this because the month in which Prophet Muhammad was born has just ended, Rabiul Awwal, and the community here has just finished, and maybe some of them are still continuing to hold assemblies with exactly those kind of hymns that we're talking about. Muslims also hold milads to mark an auspicious event, like moving into a new house. This happens here as well. Families host milads at home, but it is particularly a women's event, therefore dear to me for obvious reasons. Among Sunni Muslims especially, everyone is familiar with many well-known Naat hymns. The hymns are called Naat, a hymn to the Prophet, and anyone can join in such hymns when they are presented in assemblies. The Milad as an event has a clearly delineated performance structure, a sequence of sound events. Hymns are recited by a lead reciter with a small supporting group in praise of the Prophet, chanted in unison, and alternating with spoken prose passages that often are also chanted.